So this week is the first week since I had my abortion that I have not spent the entire week thinking about abortion. That's probably a really good thing. It's probably healthy. And so I watched the trailer for Unplanned and I had a bunch of thoughts about that. And I tried to make a video of it. I tried to post it right away and I had some technical difficulties with my camera. And that just did not work out. So I finally had to delete it. I gave up. It was not good. And so, of course, it was the one video I made where my hair actually looks good. Of course. So there's that. But also, I spent a bit of time just kind of reading up on religion and spirituality and stuff that I've been neglecting in my life that I only realized I was neglecting in my life when I found out one of my children was going to die. It's like you get the phone call, hey, there's a 70% chance your baby's going to die. It's like, oh, yeah, that spiritual life that I've been completely ignoring for the last 3 years. I might want to pull that out and dust it off a little. So I've been doing that. And it's been nice. It's been very pleasant and very interesting. And, you know, I'm not going to make a video about that. I'm just not. But it's been fun. So I had fun this week. Don't have a lot to talk about. Actually, I do have a lot to talk about. I've been looking at mainstream abortions. I tend to call them mainstream normal abortions. Pro-choicers will always argue there's no such thing as normal abortion. They're incorrect. Normal abortion happens in the first trimester, 90 to 93% of abortions. First trimester, woman finds out she's pregnant. Woman didn't want to have the baby. Woman seeks out an abortion. That is your typical average normal abortion. It is called an elective abortion. Not all elective abortions happen in the first trimester, but you know, that's a much more typical scenario. My abortion was a weird abortion. My abortion happened for medical reasons. It was considered a therapeutic abortion. It's not your standard abortion. And I would be happy to talk about abortions like that until the cows come home, but I don't know how productive it would be. At some point, you're just repeating yourself a lot, and nobody seems to want to hear about it anyway. But what about your average, normal, ordinary abortion? What's that like? What's that look like? And so I started trying to look at that, and I tried to look at that like weeks ago, and I've been just kind of pecking away at it for weeks now, just trying to learn about it and think about it. And it's interesting, like there's taboo to all abortions, but when you have a therapeutic abortion, usually something's gone medically wrong with the pregnancy. You are talking about the medical issues that cause that abortion to be indicated. So, you know, something went wrong with the mom's health, something went wrong with the baby's health, something went wrong. No abortion that I've ever encountered seems to have happened when everything was going right. Like something always has to go really, really wrong in an abortion, you know, not in an abortion, but for an abortion to happen. But with a therapeutic abortion, it's medical. For an elective abortion, usually it has to do with, you know, the sex. Namely that the sex in question probably was happening under less than ideal circumstances. And so right away that adds this second layer of taboo over the abortion debate. It's like, it's not just you're killing a person, because that's bad. That's a bad situation, especially if it's an elective abortion where this is a person who could have grown up and lived a healthy, normal life. You know, maybe they would have ended up, you know, being adopted. Maybe they would have ended up in foster care. They could have had, you know, I haven't researched that enough to know what happens to unwanted children who are put up for adoption. And I do want to research that and figure out how many of them find happy homes, how quickly do they find happy homes. My suspicion is that people want babies when they're trying to adopt. And so it's a lot easier for people to put a baby, a newborn, up for adoption and have that newborn find a home. But I don't know, so I was looking into that. And I want to continue looking into that because I only looked it up like one evening and I was like, oh, this is interesting, I need to read this. But I mean, there's this second layer of taboo. Not only are you killing a person, but you had sex, and sex is very taboo. And the thing that goes wrong with a first trimester abortion that would make a woman seek out a first trimester abortion is typically she wasn't having marital sex with the intent of becoming pregnant, or at least an openness to becoming pregnant. And so that's interesting, because that's kind of so far as I can tell, the only sex in our society that is not taboo is marital sex, usually with the idea that you want to get pregnant or are open to becoming pregnant. Because people don't talk very much about situations where people are married, but they definitely do not want to get pregnant. And there could be multiple reasons for that. I mean, maybe it is that you just want to be focused on your career and have a party or whatever. Not that those two things coincide, but, focused on your career, want to have a party. They never talk about, hey, I have this congenital disease that I don't want to pass on to the next generation because it's so horrible, I'd rather adopt. Those happen. I met somebody who had that and wanted to get her tubes tied like really bad. I don't know how bad her disease was. I knew it was congenital. I know she and some of her siblings really struggled with it and did not want to pass it on. So I know that's a thing. I know that happens. I haven't looked into it, like how much it happens or what it's like when it happens or how bad some of those diseases are. I don't know. I don't think she would have necessarily been the type. Maybe she would. Yeah, no, she probably would have been the type to seek out an abortion. Like, she really did not want to produce a baby. But then again, she was trying to get her tubes tied because of it. She didn't want to create that. I don't know. I tend to think there's more to it than that. But anyway, I mean, those cases, like in her case, more to it than that. But I mean, those cases do arise where it's like, I'm married. I want to have sex with my spouse. That's okay, right? You kind of have to, people tend to do that when they're married, and they tend to do that and it strengthens the relationship. So you kind of do want to be doing that. Like, here's a terrifying thought for some people. Your grandma had sex, probably with your grandpa. Scary, eh? Oh dear. And she probably didn't stop at the end of her reproductive years. She probably kept doing it. Scary, I know. But, people are very uncomfortable with sex happening outside of this very narrow scope of marital sex for purposes of procreation, or at least open to purposes of procreation. And I mean, I've been having a lot of that, so I mean, yay for me. The thing is, there's this idea in our society that I kind of hear whispers of every once in a while, or see whispers of, that's the boring sex, It doesn't have the taboo, but the taboo is what makes it fun and alluring. And it's kind of like, that's interesting. The forbidden sex is the sex you're supposed to want or crave or seek. And I kind of get that, but at the same time, it's like, I'm pretty sure that if I just spent like maybe an hour, I could come up with several different sources that would say that, marital sex is definitely the fun stuff. I should do that. I should look that up just because I should totally do that. But yeah, I mean, the reason that's interesting, all of that is interesting, is because there are a lot of people who say that we have an unhealthy relationship with sex in our society. And there are a lot of other people who say that is just the stiff-laced, conservative, little old church wives believe that, that's not real. Our society doesn't have an unhealthy view of sex, which I think is ignoring a lot. But, some people say that. They say, oh, the only people who complain about our society's ideas about sex being unhealthy are people who are really just too straight-laced. And that, you know, I mean, they can make that argument. And I mean, I just look at it and I think you don't need to pull out the tentacle hentai to counter that argument. Just look at the fact that the only sex you're supposed to be acceptably having in this society that isn't taboo is also considered to be the most boring of all the sex that you can be having in this society. And then tell me that we don't have a weird and messed up view of sex. I'll just, you know, leave it in the comments. I'll be waiting for you. You know, try and convince me of that. But yeah, I thought, you know, sex is fascinating and it's interesting and it definitely does tie into abortion. And here's another really scary thing that people don't like to think about at all on either side of the fence, pro-life or pro-choice, or nobody wants to think about this. Sex and procreation are linked together. I know, shocking, right? Who would have thought? Nobody wants to talk about that. Nobody wants to think about that. And you would think that the pro-choice side of the argument would be far more willing to say, oh no, sex and procreation should not be fundamentally linked together. You know, they're like, no, we should have free love and have a good time and have a party. But I see it on the pro-life side too. And the way that I see it is people who are pro-life say, if you are raped and you become pregnant, you should not have an abortion because you would be punishing an innocent person for a crime that was committed against you. And I understand that logic, but it is completely ignoring the fact that, you know, among all of the many, many bad things that rape is, because rape is bad, and I have to say that, otherwise people will think I don't think it. So for the record, rape is bad, okay? But of all the many, many things that rape is bad because of, one of the things rape is bad because of is because it impregnates a woman against her will by a partner that she had not chosen for herself. And mate choice is kind of a big deal for, like, I would say like maybe most mammalian females. I need to go look that up. Like, I know there are exceptions, but it seems like if you're a female mammal, mate choice is a big deal. And that makes a lot of sense because you're the one that has to carry around the baby for the entire gestation period. So that's, you know, a commitment. You don't make that with an inferior partner. And maybe that's the reason that a lot of women seek abortions in the first trimester. Inferior partner. Maybe that's a thing. Gotta look that up. But there's a lot to it. And it's interesting, and so I'm gonna read up on it, and I want to spend a bunch of time talking about sex. Also, it's a hell of a lot more cheerful than looking at pictures of dead babies all day. That gets a little exhausting. I think one of my cats is going nuts over there. Don't know if you can hear that. He's howling up a storm. But yeah, I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to spend some time talking about sex and talking about, I don't know. I mean, sex itself is a very, very broad thing. And I'm not even talking about the kinky stuff. We can completely leave out the kinky stuff. We can just talk about the way our society approaches sex. That is enough to make people squirm uncomfortably in their seats. You know? So that would be fun. That would be definitely a fun thing to do. And then look at how it ties back into the abortion debate. I found myself today just reading like a series of articles on freezing your eggs. And it's like, what on earth does that have to do with abortion? And it's like, well, women are freezing their eggs because they aren't ready to be pregnant yet, even though they're at an age where they're going to very rapidly be losing their fertility. So their fertility window is almost closed, but they're still not ready. women who have abortions frequently, many of them, not all of them, there are many different reasons women seek abortions, but one of the reasons, they're just not ready. And it's like, I just find myself reading through all that and thinking, well, what are you guys waiting around for? You know, when it's time, it's time. You have a very narrow, fertile window. And I know people are going to argue with me on that, like, because people have argued with me on that before. I said, you know, 35 is when you start to see a sharp decline in fertility. Like, it's always declining after you reach a certain point, but it really dips down a lot more sharply at the age of 35. And I said that, and people got really mad at me. And it was like, you know, they're telling me about all these things you can do. You can take hormone treatments. You can, you know, freeze your eggs. You can do all this other stuff. And it's like, yeah, that's not as successful of a method as you might think it would be. Like, people have this idea that now women are perfectly free to just postpone having a baby until they turn 60 and then suddenly say, you know what, I think I want a baby. I'm 60, but I can manage it. I'm 55, I can manage it. It's like, having had 3 babies, I really don't think that it works like that very well. But, you know, people have weird beliefs about that. Like, they think you can just have it all. They think you can have it all. You can have it all. You really can. You cannot have it all at once. And maybe you can't have it all as deeply. Like, I had a career before I got married, and before I had kids. I had a career. I loved my career. It was a good career for me. It was a good fit for me. Wouldn't be a good fit for most people, but for me, it was a good fit. And I had my second child, and I went to my husband and I was like, okay, well, we should start thinking about me going back to work. And he was like, well, what if we don't? And it was like, well, yeah, I mean, it's time. When it's time, it's time. And so that's how I became a stay-at-home mom. It was time. And I've got 3 kids, 3 chickens, currently 3 chickens, 3 cats, a ton of household projects. I have to paint these walls. They're not what I wanted them to be. We moved in and I tolerate them. I've got more stuff to do than I know what to do with. But at some point my kids are going to get big enough. They're going to be going off to school and I'm going to get restless and I'm going to need to have something to do. And I'm going to have to pick out a new career. Maybe I'll get restless before then. Pretty restless person right now. I get restless very easily. I get bored very easily, so I need things to do. But, you know, it doesn't mean that you're not going to have stuff to do. Like, I see women who have this weird idea that, like, and that's another thing our society is really horrible with. We have this horrible conception of what motherhood means. Like, no wonder no one wants to become a mom. No wonder women are freezing their eggs and putting it off indefinitely. No wonder women in their mid-20s, at the peak of their fertility and health and, you know, hey, this is the time you should be having babies, are getting abortions and saying, well, I just wasn't ready. It's like, people have this idea, and I mean, I'm not saying that all of them are like this. Some of them have financial issues and things where they're like, just not ready. But I'm looking at it and it's like, people have this idea that motherhood is like some sort of curse. Like, the moment you become a mom, your brain just shuts down and you don't think any intellectual thoughts at all for like the next 18 years until the baby leaves the house. And by that point, your brain is like frizzled up and you've become just woefully ignorant and you're trying to sell essential oils to people and, you know, you're a mess. And then your body's all blown out too and completely worn out. And I can tell you from experience that doesn't necessarily have to be the case. You know, we have this horrible idea of motherhood, and the really unfortunate thing is sex is tied to reproduction, and so that's tied to motherhood, and we don't want to think through that little tiny logic chain of sex, reproduction, oh my God, you're going to be a mom. And then, and no wonder people are afraid of that. Like, no wonder that's taboo. People want to leave that alone. I get that. Let's go talk about it some. Let's do that. That sounds like fun. So that's what I'm going to try and do. I'm going to try and read up on it. I'm going to try and learn about it. Obviously, I'm not a particularly well-educated individual, so I have to go read other stuff that smarter people have compiled. And then I'm going to talk about it. It should be fun. I'll talk to you guys later.